Oh, hi, everybody. Ezra Levant here with my friends Sheila, Gunn, Reid, and Drea Humphrey. And what a pleasure it is to be on the live stream. I don't get to come on that often, but it's nice to be invited. Sheila, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm doing my best to digest the gaslighting of the pipeline announcement yesterday as some sort of win for taxpayers. But other than that, everything's great.
Hey, Drea, great to see you as always. This pipeline involves British Columbia because most of our pipelines go south to the United States, our oil pipelines, our gas pipelines. But Alberta has always wanted access to the ocean. And unfortunately, the last two attempts have been blocked by Ottawa. Do British Columbians, is this a hill to die on for the average British Columbian, or is that just the activist, environmentalist, indigenous rights groups that say that? Because I don't know, maybe people don't realize how many oil and gas pipelines there are just in any city. What's the mood in British Columbia if you had to describe it?
Well, I think you're right when you say activists. A lot of this is ideologically driven. And I think the average person might not actually understand that, but the ones that are paying attention can definitely see it. And unfortunately, with our socialist NDP premier, we fall into that where, when you talk about the tanker bans and things like that, where it doesn't really make sense. I think we're going to get into this more into the show. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's small interest groups who have been pushing a certain way, and our government's falling in line with it.
You know, Vancouver's an amazing city. It's the third largest city in Canada. There's an enormous number of cars there, and one of Canada's busiest airports. It's really the main airport serving the Asia Pacific Rim. So it is a city that demands fuel, jet fuel, gasoline. There's a major port there. So a lot of those ships go on a heavy kind of bunker fuel. The idea that Vancouver is just Starbucks and vegan restaurants is not accurate. In fact, one of my favorite things about Vancouver is that this huge industrial port, it sprawls throughout for miles. There's almost nowhere in Vancouver where you can't see some of that heavy industry. And I mean, the huge container ships, freighters and tankers loading up. By the way, there's been an oil pipeline that disgorges its oil for half a century there now without a single navigational incident. I just think it's a fantasy land to think that BC is a place without heavy industry, whether it's mining or forestry or fishing or
Fracking.
transit or airfare. It is an industrial place. Sheila, you were saying?
I was saying fracking.
Yep.
Northern British Columbia is all natural gas. So this idea that British Columbia is averse to heavy industry is just something, as Drea says, a small group of special interests, largely funded from the United States, by the way, are promoting, and it's misleading and it's misinformation.
Now, Sheila, yesterday, Danielle Smith had an appearance with Mark Carney where they announced a pipeline proposal. I understand you've spent some time looking through it. It happened last night, sort of after a lot of news deadlines passed. What was the gist of it? Because my
Oh,
sense
yeah.
is that Danielle Smith wants a deal to show she can get a deal, but there's no deal she can get from Mark Carney that is appealing to actual oil producers because there's so much carbon taxes and net zero and carbon sequestration, let alone the risks that this thing will never get built because there might be some rogue judge who discovers some, new legal theory that stops it. I think that you've got a premier who wants to prove she can get something done, but she's up against an immovable object, Canada's dysfunctional politics.
Yeah, and I think if anybody thinks that this will quell separatist sentiment, they're absolutely out of their minds. Just a quick breakdown. I have notes out of the corner of my eye so I get the numbers right. But the Smith government estimates the cost of constructing this pipeline will be $35.2 billion up to nearly $44 billion. There is one private company involved here, that's Pembina Pipeline. The private sector stake in all of this is only 10%. And it sounds like Pembina Pipeline is going to be in an advisory role. Why? Because the other two partners don't know how to build pipelines. So the other two partners are both governments, either the Alberta government or Trans Mountain Pipeline, which is a government agency. So the two partners, the other partners, will be kicking in approximately, 30 to 35 billion, depending on the cost estimates. And those partners are actually the taxpayers, no matter how you look at this. So this is just another Trans Mountain mess on our hands. Yeah. We know that when the government touches pipeline projects, or any project for that matter, all of a sudden it costs 800% more and comes in years overdue. Yeah. So this, as I said off the top of the show, the gaslighting from the provincial government, this is some sort of win. It's not. It's a mess. This is one step further down the path to Venezuela. Who is going to invest in our oil and gas sector when the only way that you can get a project done is if the feds kick in a bunch of money, the province kicks in a bunch of money, and we have to buy off BC to shut their mouths about letting us build a pipeline? Because earlier in the day, an enormous amount of money was announced for British Columbia, plus a carbon trading scheme was also announced. That's what we had to give up to get this thing done, plus paying 6 times more what the industrial carbon tax currently sits at. This is not a win. This is a disaster. If this thing ever gets built, it's going to be decades before it starts making money for anybody involved. The people building it will be retired by the time this thing turns a profit.
Yeah. Drea, I noticed that when Mark Carney and Danielle Smith first announced a memorandum of understanding a few months ago, all the benefits to Alberta were years down the line. I think 2040 was one of the deadlines, whereas all the costs are up front. And Sheila mentioned, $10 billion worth of goodies thrown at David Eby to convince him to go along with this. I'm guessing that stuff happens now no matter what. He gets the payoff now no matter what, for his political benefit, for his financial benefit, and whatever might or might not come pipeline-wise, well, that's 5-10 years down the road and with a definite maybe. It just, frankly, I think Eby did the best out of everyone here. What do you think?
I agree. He's getting exactly what what he wants to do a smile. And something else to just add on here is the overlap I'm hearing both from Carney and in Eby, both in those agreements to our infrastructure, the billions that are going to be poured into it, and with this pipeline talks, they're both talking about this phrase where they're saying both of these things are reliant upon Indigenous equity ownership, except Eby's just dropping equity and saying Indigenous ownership. So that's a whole other reason why this is just a cop-out or gaslighting, because at the end of the day, which Indigenous groups are we talking about? There's so many, they're not always in agreement with each other. Some are for it, but many are against it. So if we're talking about how there is this tier level of First Nations that get a say, it almost sounds like a veto. And then who's at fault if the say that they have doesn't go well? Who's at risk? It's the taxpayers, just like Sheila said at the end of the day. And as far as it taking decades or whatever for us to see a profit of this, Marty up north did a really good breakdown on the costs of what it should or end up looking like for the taxpayers. So they're saying this is going to be about a $50 billion investment of the taxpayers. And if it will transport 1 million barrels per day at a fee of $10 per day, or per barrel, I should say, it would generate $10 million per day, which is $3.65 billion per year. But it will also cost about $1 billion, of course, to operate it for different reasons. So the initial payout of $50 billion divided by 2.65 a year, that means we're looking at about 18.8 years before we see anything on this. So it is very, you're right, Sheila, it's just a bunch of gaslighting, and David Eby's coming out on top with his radical views. And the tanker ban, he's got the tanker ban. And that makes no sense because we have these large tankers going through the South Coast, how is that any less of a risk to the North Coast? How is it any less of a risk if you have a large tanker, but you're exporting for the US, for Alaska? Why is that less of a risk to sail through? But when it comes to Canada and what we need to move forward, all of a sudden it's too high risk over in the north.
I'm glad you brought that up, because the tanker ban only applies to Alberta oil. It doesn't apply to American oil. American ships coming down from Alaska from the Beaufort Sea, they go through that same passageway. This is only blocking Alberta oil. We just saw the Keystone XL get reborn by another name. Same pathway, different company. It's called the Bridger Pipeline, and it was approved like that by the Americans. Cross-border pipeline. What should have happened here, in my not all that expert opinion, is they should have just rebirthed the Northern Gateway Pipeline. In fact, this Frankenstein monster of a pipeline starts in the exact same place. It will use a lot of the existing infrastructure that was built for the Northern Gateway Pipeline in Bruderheim, Alberta, just up the road from me. It'll go from there, but then it will head south instead of taking the shorter, more affordable route to a deep water port near Kitimat, BC, where they already have a port there, where they already have existing infrastructure. They made this thing infinitely more expensive and inconvenient to head it south to the Port of Vancouver. And I refuse to see this as the win everybody is touting it as. It's likely never going to get built. Yeah. Who would invest in us ever again, seeing this?
You know, when I wrote my book, Ethical Oil, The Case for Canada's Oil Sands, about 15 years ago now, or more than a decade ago, and the idea that the government was needed to make a pipeline was unthinkable. You had 3 different companies, each so eager to do it. I mean, there was one called Energy East, which was actually my favorite because it would go from Alberta all the way east to New Brunswick. And a lot of people don't know, New Brunswick actually has Canada's largest refinery. It's an Irving refinery. It takes OPEC oil, like from conflict oil countries, refines it there, sells a lot of it into the U.S. So this would bring Alberta oil to Irving. So it would displace that foreign conflict oil. And it was a wonderful construction project for the whole country. That was nuked by the Liberals. There was the Northern Gateway, nuked by the Liberals, and then there was the Trans Mountain, which was owned by a third company, nuked by the Liberals, and then they took it over. And then there's the Keystone. Like, there was 4 pipelines that were being brainstormed, all of which were being done with private money. Like, I want to let you know, none of those companies I've just described asked for, needed, wanted, planned on government money. Pipelines are an extremely profitable business everywhere else in the world, and they're built much more quickly, and they're very safe.
Brookfield knows that. Brookfield knows that. They invest in pipelines in the United States.
And the idea that we now, and I have no idea where this $35 billion is coming from. Some of the pipelines I've just described, Energy East, Keystone XL, et cetera, if you would say 15 billion, I'd say, okay, but 35? The only way I can imagine that being the case is if there's a lot of people who, as you just described, Drea, have an ownership in it that they didn't pay for. I mean, I have no idea how you spend $35 billion on a pipeline where the private sector was happy to do it for a third of that. I just don't get it. And you know what? I like Danielle Smith. I've known her for a while. I really think she's trying to get a win, but this is so unlikely to succeed, I believe. And I think the proof of the pudding's in the tasting. Will any companies in Alberta sign up for it? Here's what I mean. We talked about the Keystone XL pipeline a moment ago. That was actually killed by Barack Obama. But it was all permitted. It was all ready to go. It was going to take about 800,000 barrels of oil a day from Canada to the U.S. Okay, now it's been revived by Donald Trump with permits on the U.S. side. It's now called South Bow. The company's called South Bow. It's ready to rock. And here's my point. About a month ago, they made an announcement, Drea, that they're full up. They had what they called open season. So they went to all the oil companies and said, hey, if we build this pipeline across the border to the States, we need guaranteed customers. Will you sign a contract to put your oil in it for 20 years?
Wow.
That's a real put up or shut up moment, isn't it? They sold out. The entire pipeline is pre-sold for 20 years. You've got companies saying, can we have some of that? Can we have some of that? You bet, we're in. They're ready to rock. And they announced they're going to make the final investment decision next year. So no government money, total support from the industry, ready to rock next year. Who would say, no, actually, I'm going to stop that sure thing, that affordable thing, and instead of going down to the Americans who love our oil, let me roll some dice. Let me roll like a 20-sided Dungeons and Dragon die. And there's so many risks on it, let me go, will BC stop us? Will a rogue judge stop us? Will Indigenous titles stop us? Will environmental activists stop us? Who would say, I'm going to quit the South Bow sure thing and go in this pig in a poke that Mark Carney approves maybe in 10 years? I just don't think it's going to happen.
No, and neither does industry, by the way. We know that the Cenovus CEO, John McKenzie, I think this is the direct quote, he said, "We have created a set of national policies and regulations that make resource development and investment in Canada uncompetitive with the rest of the world." And he's right, because the only way that we can get a pipeline to Tidewater is for the feds and the provinces to pony up a bunch of cash, plus we have to pay a bribe to British Columbia. There was a real easy way to do this. Kill the tanker ban, kill the production ban, kill the industrial carbon tax, and we would have had a flood of investment into the oil and gas sector. Instead, they did absolutely none of that and actually added something on top of that. So this weird carbon trading scheme, which Carney's been up to, or at least pushing for years in different roles, and then, hiking up the industrial carbon tax 6.5 times.
Listen, I'm enjoying this conversation very much, but we've got some clips. Now, Sheila, I have not looked at these clips in advance. I understand that most of these were clipped last night from the late night press conference. Do you want to sort of take us through that?
Sure.
And either call for the clips or Olivia could serve them up. Why don't you take over and bring some of these vids for our folks to see?
Sure. So Olivia, let's start with vid 1. It's Prime Minister Mark Carney bragging up this pipeline. And he's basically sticking the thumb in the eye of people who are against carbon taxes, which add to the cost of everything. He's basically saying, we are extracting all this extra carbon tax revenue on you by permitting you to build this pipeline.
This is a new approach that helps us reach our full potential, one that builds in partnership, the federal government, Alberta, British Columbia, partnership with territories, partnership with Indigenous peoples, partnership with the private sector. Indigenous peoples, full partners in development, operating, and equity ownership. We've agreed, or at least I think that's what's in the submission that I may get momentarily, that the best route for a new pipeline is one that goes through one that already exists, south through the Trans Mountain Corridor to our Pacific coast, the gateway to the world's fastest growing markets. We've already agreed to reform carbon markets so they promote real emissions. We've already agreed to substantial methane reductions and to new measures, new incentives and reforms so that power markets can grow sustainably and affordably, and this being Alberta, significantly. We will maintain, the federal government will maintain the tanker ban to protect Canada's coastlines and precious habitats. And consistent with the MOU as a prerequisite for the pipeline, the Government of Canada, the Government of Alberta, and the Oil Sands Alliance, the 5 companies in the Oil Sands Alliance, have now agreed on the terms to launch the Pathways Project, the world's largest carbon capture and utilization and storage project, which together with other emission reduction commitments in the agreement will achieve 16 million tons of emissions reductions per year, or the equivalent of taking 90% of the cars in Alberta off the road. Critically, what we've agreed is that the time for action is now. We will refer a submission that I may receive, Alberta's West Coast Pipeline Project proposal immediately to the Major Projects Office. Consultations will begin immediately with Indigenous communities, relevant provinces and territories to determine listing under the Building Canada Act by October 1st, as per our agreement.
We're not supposed to be building anything in partnership with the federal government. Like, we're not supposed to be building oil and gas projects in partnership with the Alberta government and the federal government. I don't know why we're normalizing this. And I can't believe our free enterprise, free market premier is standing in the background nodding her head.
Yeah.
Like she didn't build a career fighting this stuff.
You know, I'm interested in oil and gas. I'm interested in around the world. It's certainly part of politics. Look at Iran and the war there and how it's affected prices everywhere. It's been interesting watching Donald Trump turn on production everywhere from Alaska to the Gulf of America, as he now calls it. Nowhere else in the world do they say you'll only be able to do this if you have methane emissions and emissions reductions. And then he's talking about power markets. What's that got to do with anything here? And what he calls the Pathways Project, which is this huge carbon capture. I understand that all these costs alone are going to add $10 to $20 per barrel. It's just going to make it uneconomic. If you've got to pay for the pipeline itself, but if you've got to pay for all these goofy social license baubles that no customer, look, oil is made by the worst people in the world. Iran, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria,
Algeria,
Venezuela, like the worst, Qatar, the worst people. Sudan, literally blood oil. I once calculated, I know this sounds super gross, but people use the word blood oil. The amount of people killed in the massacres in Sudan divided into the barrels of oil produced over the same period of time, it's like a thimbleful of blood per barrel. They eat so much blood, and they have no trouble selling that oil. People bought oil from ISIS. You know,
Right.
People are still buying oil from Vladimir Putin, their ghost fleet of tankers. No one is saying, this is a very fine barrel of oil, but I will not buy it unless it has just the little soupçon of carbon reduction. Like, no one is that. People say, I'll do anything for a barrel of oil. And by the way, I love the bad stuff because it sells, like, why has Russia been so strong during its Ukraine war? Because it's selling everything it wants to India and China. They don't care. Frankly, if the West puts sanctions on it, it drives down the price for India and China. Anyhow, my big rant is to say, no one else in the world puts these burdens on oil companies, but I think this is just Stephen Guilbeault in a suit.
Yeah, let us know what you think. If you guys are watching, you're just as passionate about this conversation. We forgot to invite you to do so, to be a part of the show, which you can join in if you're watching on YouTube through Super Chats, because this is crazy what's happening here. And if you're on Rumble, you can join the show by Rumble Rants. And if you donate $5 or more towards our journalism, of course, it helps keep Rebel alive, but we read it and make it part of the show. But every time he said partnership there, and Sheila, you're totally right. We shouldn't be partnering with the Liberal government on this, but every time he said partnership, for me, it was like red tape, red tape, red tape. It's just
not
another
just red tape, money, read taxpayer money.
Restrictions and things like that too. And the other thing, I just want to go back to the other thing with keeping this tanker ban, this stranglehold. Yeah. This is Prime Minister Mark Carney, who has been trying to act like we need to be independent and things, and we need to kind of move away from our cousins in the US. And the tanker ban is restricting Prince Rupert, very deep water and closer to Asia. So this was such a huge opportunity if we can remove that senseless ban and go ahead and allow the oil to go through, we would be on top of the world.
Right. We do have a clip of him saying that they are maintaining the tanker ban. Olivia, I believe that is, you know what? Let's just go to David Eby, video 8, saying that his government will not go to court over a proposed oil pipeline. I mean, he's not going to, but he's not going to intervene on behalf of the Alberta government when the inevitable lawsuits from Indigenous bands who are nowhere near the pipeline route get involved.
Pipeline proposal from Alberta. However, as I've said before, we recognize our constitutional position, and we do not have the authority to stop a new pipeline. We will not be going to court to fight a pipeline project. Instead, we will ensure we fulfill our constitutional obligations in good faith. Pipelines are federal jurisdiction. That's why this agreement matters. It ensures that the Northern Tanker Ban stays in place, and it ensures that if a pipeline goes ahead, that British Columbians are fairly compensated for the environmental risks we would take on any new pipeline project.
There it is. So we have to not just give him yesterday's bribes, but bribes going forward for, the risks that he's taking. As Ezra pointed out earlier, Trans Mountain, the original Trans Mountain, has been operating since the Korean War without incident. I mean, this is crazy that we're paying him for risk. But it's interesting that he's just now recognizing that he does not have the constitutional ability to block a pipeline, because he's been saying the opposite for a very long time. And actually, Mark Carney has allowed him to say the opposite for a very long time.
That's because he's getting what he wants, though, too, right? Like,
So-
so he's not going to go to court because he's getting what he wants. It's a win-win for him. And he's totally ignoring, like you said, there's been without incident. What about the fact of how far technology has advanced in this area
for
to
sure.
prevent spills? And he must know that that's the thing, but we're still living like it's this huge risk.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Ezra.
Not only does BC get the construction benefits, but for all time, there's property taxes paid by, like, I know, I don't know this proposed pipeline, but other pipelines are often the largest single property taxpayer in a particular county. Obviously, there's not as many continuing jobs as there is during the construction phase, but to say, we need to offset our costs here. People normally love it when things are built. These are great jobs. And by the way, since pipelines go through rural parts, a lot of the work is naturally picked up by nearby Indian bands. And there's a lot of outdoorsy work, frankly, clearing a pathway. There's different levels of technological or skilled labor on any project. I haven't been to Fort McMurray in a while, but even just the camps for the workers, just to cook and clean and feed and house and help the men working on these is an enormous benefit, and those jobs primarily go to local folks, of course. It's this idea that this is a burden somehow. This is a burden that Alberta needs to pay bribes for, and we're so sorry to impose it. I don't know. I'm skeptical. Listen, I want Danielle Smith to succeed, but I don't think this is going to succeed. If you had $100 of your own money, would you bet that this is going to work? And if not, well, then why would any oil company bet $100 million or $1 billion? They can't go on hunches. They have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders to do risk-adjusted rate of returns that are reasonable. And over the last 10 years, as oil companies have fled Canada, it's insane as they've made the decision it's too risky to invest in Alberta, BC, whatever. They will invest, therefore, in, and I keep saying Kazakhstan because it's just such a shocking thing to say. Imagine a company saying, we believe it is less risky to get a rate of return from fricking Kazakhstan than from Alberta. There is something wrong in Canada. And all this talk about, independence is scaring people off. Yeah, no, I don't think independence is scary. In fact, getting rid of the feds, if all you had to deal with was we're going to ship our oil down south to Americans, they'd say, give us all you have. I don't know. It's, Olivia, I don't know if you can find the clip when I interviewed the U.S. ambassador a few months ago. I specifically asked him, not only can we sell our oil to you, can we go south and then cut over to the coast? I don't know if you can find that quickly, Olivia, but of course the Americans would take our oil. Of course they wouldn't make these demands on us. I think, if anything, this proves that Ottawa can't get it done. even with a very cooperative and friendly premier in Alberta, Ottawa cannot get it done in the system.
Well, and just to go back to your other point about this idea that having oil and gas in your neighborhood is some sort of burden. I live in Strathcona County. If you won't be able to find me, viewers, but if you do, don't. But we have some of the lowest property tax to home values in the entire country, if not the lowest. Our roads are great. Why? Several refineries and a bunch of pipelines. And it's because our property taxes are subsidized by those that the oil companies pay. They pay such enormous property taxes, it keeps everybody else's lower, and they sponsor everything. Every hockey rink has an oil company name on it. All the kids' teams are sponsored by the local oil company, pipeline company, service company, whatever. It's a huge benefit to your community. And he's pretending like they just come in, pillage the place, leave a mess, and then go home. It's not that. They become longstanding parts of the community where everybody gets a benefit going forward.
Yeah. You know, I was in Midland, Texas a few years back, and I love it down there. I mean, you got to love those Texans.
Oh.
And I support them totally. But it is a little bit shocking to come from Alberta and to know how extreme the cleanup rules are in Alberta, and then to go to Midland, Texas, and to see, I don't want to be mean, but they just leave it a mess down. They just do. It's a mess down there. And I'm not telling them how to run their state, but Canada is so much more stringent. You spill 1 liter of oil, you've got to have a report, you've got to disclose that to the 1 liter. And you've got to disclose it. The things I saw in Texas, I mean, listen, if it works for them, I'm not going to tell them they're wrong. But
it's not our business.
You know, the level of environmental and social and all that stuff is already, it's insane how much it is. It's almost like DEI. It's so crazy. Yeah. I don't mean that in a race or gender way. It's just the lengths they go to and no one else in the world does. And at a certain point, you have to say, you know what, maybe we're chumps. Maybe we're chumps.
I agree. Let's go to another clip. Premier Smith explaining why the taxpayer has to foot the bill for something that used to happen in the private sector where everybody made money, including the provincial government off the royalties. So that is vid 5, Olivia.
After 7 months, this project will now require government support in terms of equity. Why do you think that it remains too risky for the private sector to run with it by itself?
I would say that we did have a number of projects, and I can elaborate on them. I mean, we did have Northern Gateway that had all of its approvals, and they were then canceled. We did have Keystone XL, who had all of its approvals and were starting to build pipelines across the border, and a presidential permit was canceled. We had Energy East that was $1 billion into a regulatory approval process and couldn't see the way to a finish line, so it was canceled. So we have pipeline companies that have literally spent billions of dollars in recent years on failed regulatory approval processes. That's the environment we're finding ourselves in. And so it does take some work, I think, to make sure that the private sector proponents understand that this is a real process. There's a real commitment on the part of all 3 parties, myself, as well as the Premier of British Columbia, as well as the Prime Minister, to get this project to the finish line. So what the share of the private sector stake will be, that remains to be seen. Maybe over time, as more and more certainty comes in, maybe we'll be talking with Scott about him wanting to take on a larger and larger share. But we want to make sure that a company knows that we're walking this path with them, so that we can get it to the end. And I won't speak for the Prime Minister, but I did notice that they have already received a over $1 billion dividend payment from the Trans Mountain pipeline. And so it seems to me that once you get through the construction process and you start earning revenue, it is an incredibly lucrative type of infrastructure that will benefit taxpayers. That was our consideration.
Okay, that was odd. She listed all the pipelines that were killed by the federal government, and then she partners with the federal government on this one? That makes very little sense to me.
How is that the excuse for not letting it be in the private sector? I didn't even
Well,
catch that.
I mean, she is right. These pipelines were
Well, they don't.
billions of dollars into the regulatory approval process. Then the government changes the rules in the middle of that approval process. And so companies just throw up their hands and say, forget it. We can't make this work if the playing field keeps changing all along the way. But who's to say that the people, you are there with the people who did that? You're partnering with the people who did that. Who's to say they aren't going to change the rules on their own project? They don't care about wasting taxpayer money. At least a private sector company has shareholders to be accountable for. If the feds decide along the way to change the rules and all of a sudden the pipeline doesn't go forward, what do they care? Ezra?
You know, I don't know a lot about oil and gas. I've never worked in the field. I mean, I've written about some of the politics in it. I think there's really only one test to this, which is, will companies participate? And I suppose that's the only test. And I say again, there is a control group, as they say in scientific experiments. The control group would be the South Bow pipeline that, as I mentioned, is fully sold out, fully subscribed for 20 years. I mean, we run a little business called Rebel News. We have subscriptions and we try and get people to renew. Imagine if I were to say we have people who have agreed to subscribe for 20 years. We're complete. I don't know how we could ever be full at Rebel News, so that the analogy breaks down. But imagine having 20-year commitments to fill up your pipe. What a signal that, yeah, you are doing something right. And then by contrast, imagine all of this. In my mind, I can't think of, and you know what, by the way, there's a lot more oil that's about to come. I mean, Venezuela is, when they took out Nicolas Maduro earlier this year and invited in American oil companies to revive, by some measurements, Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, even more than Saudi Arabia, and it's heavy oil, which is a direct competitor to us. And now you've got all these Americans and some Canadians down there who are we might miss our moment. Like if Venezuela adds an extra 1 million or 2 barrels a day, which is possible, and it's heavy oil that goes right to those refineries that was supposed to be us, I don't know, I just find this very sad. As someone who grew up in Alberta, I always thought that industry was relentless, indefatigable, unlimited. And now I just see it's like Gulliver in Gulliver's Travels. It's being tied down by 1,000 little people with strings. And Danielle Smith, I know what she's doing. She's trying to be positive. She's trying to get a win. She's trying to say, well, maybe I can compromise because they're going to steal those things anyways. Maybe I can bargain them away. But maybe, as Keith Wilson told me the other day, maybe Alberta has more strength in its negotiating position than it lets on. And I remember asking Danielle Smith, can you find this clip, Olivia? It's me moderating the Alberta Prosperity Project debate about 5 years ago. They asked me to be the MC for a debate for the UCP leadership. This is when Danielle Smith was not an MLA and she was not premier. It was a debate. And I asked her, can you find this one? I don't know how you'd look for it.
I'm looking.
I said to her, Ms. Smith, you have all these ideas of how you want to strengthen Alberta and Canada, but what's your or else? If you're just pleading and begging and asking, you'll never get it. Isn't independence something you keep in your back pocket as an or else so you get the Fed's attention? And she said yes. Let me try and find that clip, because where is that Danielle Smith? Where's the Danielle Smith who, as Teddy Roosevelt said, walk softly and carry a big stick? The big stick is independence. And I think she threw that away by saying, you know what, I'm for Remain now. Before you say that, once you get the deal, yeah, that's it right there. Here, let's play that clip. You managed to find it. Oh, I looked so handsome back then. Take a look. Quebec, for centuries, has been a minority, a linguistic minority, cultural, economic minority, but they did something different. They had an or else added to the end of it. How far are you willing to go? Are you willing to say, we want these things or else? At what stage would you, for example,
invoke the Clarity Act as clarified by the Supreme Court. For example, calling a referendum on the Clarity Act question of secession. Do you have an or else in mind? What is it, and what would make you use it? And if not, how are you serious? And I'll start off with Danielle Smith on that one.
The or else is Dennis Modry and the Alberta Prosperity Project. It's true. We proclaimed into law on April the 7th the Citizen Initiative Act, which gives the people the power to collect signatures for a petition campaign to propose an amendment. If it's a simple matter of policy, it's a 10% threshold. If it's a constitutional change, it's a 20% threshold. That would mean 600,000 signatures. And as I understand it, Dr. Modry has 1 million people on his database. So part of when I decided I wanted to run, I knew how important it was to make sure that we addressed the issues of autonomy. And I talked to Dr. Modry as one of my first steps. I said, let's try this together. Let's get as much autonomy as we can. Full well knowing that he's got the power, you've got the power. If we're not successful, and this is why I take your movement very, very seriously, and why Justin Trudeau should take it very, very seriously too, because you have the power to be able to be the or else.
Well, some of that came to pass. The Alberta Prosperity Project, under the leadership of Mitch Sylvester, went out and got 301,000 signatures on a petition, which was beyond the new threshold. And now what? You know, a rogue judge says it's not good enough. You can't proceed. It's illegal to proceed. So now there's a referendum on a referendum. I think that you're tough during the negotiation, and then you're friendly after you get what you want. To give away the or else of independence while you're trying to negotiate something, I just don't get it. Makes me a little bit sad to look at that old clip there, because that's that fighting spirit. Plus, I had more hair.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I don't expect Danielle Smith to be an advocate for separatism, but I also don't expect her to get in the way when that is your sharpest knife against the feds right now. And where's that Danielle Smith? Where is she?
I was just chatting with Olivia, who reminded us that we have some advertisers. And, you know, I'm having such a good time. I can't believe 45 minutes has gone by so much. And I apologize, you two, for talking so much. It's just I have a lot to say, and I haven't been on the show in a while. So thank you for letting me crash the party here. But why don't we take some of those ads to pay the bills, and we'll come right back.
For generations, many Canadians have preserved more than just firearms. They've preserved history, tradition, competition, memories. But under Trudeau, and now Carney, heirlooms, estates, collectibles, and competition firearms now have to be surrendered and destroyed. While violent gun criminals get pass after pass, openly ignoring any legislation, lawful gun owners are trapped in an increasingly unfair legal system. But we can help. Canada's National Firearms Association's Save Firearms program offers the legal pathway to preserve what matters, while we work towards a political solution. Don't let yours be next. Save history. Save heritage. Save firearms. Visit nfa.ca today to learn more.
Canada's been told to just quit smoking for decades, same message over and over, and yet millions of Canadians still smoke. So let's ask a follow-up question. For those who don't quit, what about change? In 2026, Canada has options that didn't exist years ago. Smoke-free alternatives for adults who would otherwise continue smoking. That doesn't mean risk-free, it means informed choice. If you don't smoke, don't start. If you smoke, quit. But for those who don't quit, change could still be part of the conversation. That's why Canadians should check out unsmoke.ca, an information resource focused on smoke-free alternatives and honest facts, not judgment. Put the lighter down, Canada. Learn what your options are.
In Canada, firearms owners like me understand the importance of safe, effective self-defense options. That's why we're proud to have Byrna as a sponsor. Byrna's less lethal launchers are designed to help protect you and your family without taking a life. Byrna offers peace of mind, accessibility, and a practical layer of personal security for Canadians who value safety. Learn more at byrna.ca/rebel. That's byrna.ca/rebel.
Canadians know the national anthem. They stand in silence to remember those who died for this country. But not every Canadian knows their rights and freedoms. The Freedom Passport will change that. It looks and feels like a Canadian passport, but contains the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms in a portable, easy-to-read format. The Freedom Passport. Order one for yourself and for all the freedom lovers that you love at freedompassport.ca.
Sheila, looks like we've got some super chats and Rumble rants. Why don't you read some of them?
I will. And Olivia, I think we missed one or two yesterday. If you could dig those up, I just don't want to not acknowledge the people who spend their hard-earned money on us. All right. We've got one here from Chris McLaughlin, 524, gives us $5 and says, Danielle Smith needs to be Kenny'd at this fall's AGM. By Kenny'd, Chris means ousted from the leadership. And I know that there are some rumblings organizing against her. But I'll just put the facts to you. She is intensely popular within the party, 90% plus approval rating. And you need to really, if this is what you want to do, you really need to concern yourself with the potential to fracture whatever movement on whatever side you're on. So if you are in the UCP camp, but you're in the Remain camp, you have to be careful. Because the majority of your own party, 60%-ish, supports independence. And I'm talking about the membership, not the MLAs. I don't really care what the MLAs think. But the membership itself is supportive of independence. So do you want to drive a wedge in that party and fracture it wide open, and then you have somebody like Naheed Nenshi run up the middle? That's what happened in 2015 with the vote split on the right. So you got to be careful about that. But also on the other side, if you're independence minded, you swing too hard at her and you will also cause a fracture in the party because she's popular with people within the party. So my advice to you is I'm not giving you advice. I'm just telling you that those are the risks that you're going, that's the risk there. So think about it. And then Bueno Kitty 3497 says, Cry EB. Once the tanker ban, some guy forgot Mark signed swaths of BC land rights to First Nations, including Vancouver. Expect obstruction until Mark flees. Yes, that is probably going to be the case, especially in British Columbia with so much of it being unceded. They're real problems, I think, will present themselves and tie things up in the courts. I think that's it, unless Olivia finds those other ones that we skipped over yesterday. Ezra, do you want to talk about the Alberta's Choice ads?
Well, you're the point person on that third-party advertiser, so it's sort of your turf. But I get a real kick out of these ads.
Me too.
They're AI ads in the spirit of Spencer Pratt, the LA challenger for mayor down there. And I think they're sort of funny because there's a truth underneath them. They feature some of the Federalist voices in Alberta, Jason Kenney, the former premier, Naheed Nenshi, the NDP opposition leader, and Thomas Lukaszuk, who's, for those who don't know, he's sort of like a Fabio-type character.
Yeah. Deputy premier under
former
Alison
deputy
Redford.
premier is a Red Tory, he's in Edmonton. And so there's two ads in a row. Sheila, why don't you introduce the ads? I don't know if all your viewers have seen them before, but maybe they're pretty short. They're less than a minute each. Maybe play the first one and then the second one, just to. And this might not ring a lot of bells for folks outside of Alberta, but for those in the province, they might get a kick out of them.
Right. So it features our most prominent Federalists, and I just want to correct Ezra when he calls Thomas Lukaszuk a Red Tory. I think he campaigned for the NDP in the last election, which is probably a lot more accurate. He's married to a lady who works for CTV, completing the circle. And these ads through Alberta's Choice, which is my third-party advertiser in the independence campaign, The series is called The Federalists. We dropped the first one, which I think went a little bit viral, and we're just dropping the second one now in a series on the Federalists and their war room against everyday Albertans who just want to determine their own future. So this is the first one, and then we'll debut the second one to you.
When Alberta dared ask for fairness, Ottawa's strongest soldiers assembled.
We must protect the Federation.
Canada forever. Alberta under control.
Calm down, Alberta. The adults are talking.
We must control Alberta, even if it costs them everything.
Their mission was simple. Keep Alberta in. Keep Alberta paying.
You boys look like the HR department at a pipeline protest.
I hadn't seen that yet. That's hilarious.
It's pretty funny. And you know what? I think it's fairly anatomically correct, at least in terms of being slightly portly. I say this as one plus-sized gentleman about a few others there. In fact, I think it's sort of like the lads are wearing Spanx. And
yes.
I mean, Fabio is
we were more than fair to them.
There's no point in being mean to Fabio. He's handsomer than me. But the other two lads, let me put it this way. 25 years ago, Jason, Kenny, and I were part of an informal street gang called the Snack Pack. And so you can see to this day, we still bear the burden of our overindulgence. You know, Hugh Segal used to have a joke about, this was a generation ago when Bill Clinton talked about he smoked marijuana, but he didn't inhale. That was his line. It was such a Clinton line. He said when he was in college, he smoked marijuana and didn't inhale. Well, why not just embrace it? Why not just say you did it in college? But he was so Clintonian. He said, oh, I didn't inhale. So Hugh Segal said, well, my drug of choice was pastrami. And as you can see, I inhaled. So anyways, the Snack Packers have inhaled. But there's a second follow-up video that Sheila's third-party group just rolled out yesterday, and it's with the same group of superheroes. And, I mean, you've got to have some self-confidence to dress in form-fitting clothes like that. Like it is like a natural girdle, let's be honest. It's like Spanx, but for gents. And, but, I think those guys are looking as good as they're ever going to look. Let's play the second installment in the series.
After being humiliated on the prairies, Ottawa's heroes retreated to the capital to prepare their next move. If Alberta wouldn't be lectured back into line, they would have to be scared back into line.
We need stronger messaging. We need to frighten them calmly.
Canada forever, even if Alberta says no.
What if we just tell them we're smarter than them?
Alberta needs to believe they'll lose their passports, their pensions, even their pets. Operation Fear is how we keep Alberta in and keep Alberta paying.
And so, Operation Fear was born. They took their plan public. A campaign built on one simple strategy.
They couldn't bring facts, so they brought spendex. Looks like the carbon tax formed a boy band. I guess fear's all they've got left. Best ad for independence yet.
I've known Naheed Nenshi since we were teenagers. I used to see him in the high school debate circuit. And then when we both graduated, we both went to University of Calgary. And believe it or not, we were debating partners. There was this debate team, and for 2 years, Naheed and I, and it was sort of this traveling road show. You had this left-wing Muslim and this right-wing Jew, moi, and it was quite a spectacle. And I have to say, and I'm sure he has certain things he would say about me, but that line of Nenshi there, why don't we just tell them we're smarter than them?
So true.
That looks deeply into Naheed's soul. I've known Naheed for 40 years. And I don't know how our video generator did it, but he distilled Naheed's essence into one line. That is who he is. Listen, we could all be more modest. We could all be more humble. We could all be more generous. We all have sins to work on and flaws. But holy smokes, is Naheed ever a pompous ass?
Yeah, and what I love about both of those videos is it's these 4 self-important, fancy weirdos thinking that they are smarter than everybody, that they can control everybody, that they wield so much power, but at the end of each video, they just meet a regular dude who laughs in their faces and makes fun of them. And really, that's, I think, a lot of what's happening in Alberta right now on the ground. So while it pokes fun at the self-important, self-appointed leaders of federalism, where the rubber meets the road, normal people don't take these guys all that seriously.
Well, it's almost the top of the hour, and thank you, ladies, for letting me barge in and yap about these things. But I am worried about Alberta, and I'm worried about Danielle Smith, who as you can see, I've been talking to her about independence for 5 years now. And she's in a very important position, and she's in a strong leadership position, not just for Alberta, but she's a kind of, or could be a kind of, national opposition leader. I think she's hugging Mark Carney too tightly. And I just don't see the payoff for Alberta, and it makes me sad and worried. And anytime David Eby looks to get one over on Danielle Smith, I don't think that's a great day. So anyways, thank you two for having me on. Drea, what are your final thoughts for the day?
Well, I just wanted to say, if you noticed in those ads, Mark Carney's voice, I think, was 100% accurate. But that's because Mark Carney talks like he's AI all the time.
That's a great point. That's really true.
Close your eyes when he's talking and you're like, this is AI. And you're like, no, that actually is Mark Carney. It's pretty weird. But thanks for having me.
Right on.
And if people want to help me making more ads, because they do take a little bit of money and fighting back against, as I said, those self-important weirdos, it's not a cheap proposition. You can get involved and see the rest of our work, including our project, albertafactcheck.com. Go to albertas-choice.com. That's my third-party advertiser registered with Elections Alberta.
Well, let's say goodbye, folks. There's so much to do at Rebel News, so many stories we're following. And until next time, on behalf of all of us here at Rebel World Headquarters and across the country, to you at home, goodbye, and keep fighting for freedom.
You know, folks, in my many years of reporting for Rebel News, I've covered corrupt politicians, rogue bureaucrats, and even parking enforcement officers who'd rather take a nap than write some tickets. But I have to say, this is a first. Apparently, I'm now available as a gift. Rebel News has launched something we're calling shoutouts. Here's the idea. You pick your favorite Rebel News journalist, maybe that's yours truly, or maybe it's someone else, that's okay. I won't take it personally. You tell us who the message is for, what the occasion is, and any details that'll make it feel personal. A name, an inside joke, a few things we should know about them. The more info you give us, the better the video. We'll record a selfie-style video and deliver it straight to your inbox within 3 business days. Birthdays, graduations, anniversaries, retirements, Father's Day, Mother's Day, Christmas, you name it. Messages are available in 30, 60, and 90-second increments, starting at just $100. Need it fast? Add 24-hour rush delivery for an extra $50. And every dollar you spend goes directly toward supporting Rebel News and our independent journalism. No government bailouts here, no corporate strings, just Canadians helping Canadians to keep telling the truth. Give the gift no one saw coming. Visit rebelnews.com/shoutouts. That's rebelnews.com/shoutouts to make your request